Welcome, Pastor, as he comes to bring the word today.
Prophecy. Where are we? Where do we fit in right now in prophecy? And I mentioned that Revelations is filled with unfulfilled prophecies of things yet to come. And the book of Revelations is certainly, without question, the most vivid, fascinating, and frightening of all the books in the Bible. The disciples came to Jesus in Matthew 24, and they asked him 3 questions. They wanted to know the date and the sign of his coming and of the end of the world. 3 questions. Jesus gave them a list of things to watch for so they wouldn't be taken unawares. And he says, watch for religious deception. And boy, there's a lot of that going on today. And he said, there'll be wars and rumors of wars. There'll be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes. And then he said in verse 6, Matthew 24, he said, but the end is not yet. And then in verse 8 he said, this is just the beginning. When you see these things, that's not the end. It's just the beginning of things that are going to be happening. Now, he went on then and he gave them an illustration of what it was going to be like when he comes. He says, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Way it was in Noah's day, he said they were eating, they were drinking, they were marrying and giving in marriage. And I've heard preachers stand up and spit and slobber and carry on. They were eating and drinking. How horrible. Well, I had something to eat this morning. And I had about a quart of water and several cups of coffee. And I'll probably eat again today. And I married and I gave in marriage. So what he was saying was, people will be carrying on everyday activities. They won't be expecting anything to happen. Everything will be normal, calm, peaceful. No hint of impending doom and disaster. Now, a lot of people today are in the dark. We are expected to discern the signs of the times. We're going to look at some things that are yet to come and see if we can determine from what we know is in the book, we can see if we can determine where we are. Where do we fit in to this scheme of things, to prophecy? Revelation is without question the most obscure book in the Bible. It's full of strange, symbolic language, allegories, symbols. Revelation means unveiling. It means a disclosure. Its purpose is to unveil future events that are to take place on the earth while showing the sovereignty of God over it all. Now, I hear people say regularly there is no way we can understand the book of Revelations. If it was completely incomprehensible and we're not supposed to understand it, why write it? Why put it in there if we're not supposed to understand it? God expects us to understand Revelations and the events that it predicts. In Revelations 1, verses 1 through 3, he says he's going to give to his servants things which must shortly come to pass. Well, Mack, people have been preaching this, and Joe and I talked about this the other day. Every time something's going on the planet, people start going to pulpit and preaching about Jesus is coming back. We don't know that. But he said shortly come to pass. Well, listen, God is not on our time frame. He's not on a 24-hour-a-day clock. He's not on a calendar. He says a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day. So he said things which must shortly come to pass. It's only been 2 days with God. So that's shortly. Then he said, in verse 3, if we can't understand it, why did he pronounce a blessing? He said, I'm going to unveil some things to you. I'm going to show you what's coming to pass. And then he pronounced a blessing in verse 3. He said, blessed is he that reads, they that hear, so you're hearing it, the words of this prophecy, and keep those words which are written therein, for the time is at hand. He pronounces a blessing on you. Now, what is the value of a book or a letter that you can't understand it? And why would he pronounce a blessing when he said, you'll be blessed if you read it or you hear it and you keep it? So if you can't understand it, how are you going to keep it? Are you breathing? Revelations begins with a message to the 7 churches of Asia. 7, complete number, perfect number. That's all of them. It includes all of the churches of all times, today, yesterday, and tomorrow. There's churches left here. In verse 19, I'm still in Revelations 1. I'm just giving you an overview, and we're going to see where we are, and then we will come back next week, and we'll take up there and go on a little further. But he tells John, Jesus tells John what he wants him to write. Verse 19, Revelations 1. Write the things which you have seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. Now, not all of Revelation is prophecy. Some of it is history. So we have the book of Revelations is past, present, and future. And it's going to be that way for every generation. Things that have happened, if you don't know a little bit about history, and especially the history of Israel, why they exist, what their purpose was, know a little bit about the history, something about the book of Daniel. In Revelations chapter 2 and 3, now I'm just giving you an overview. Revelations chapters 2 and 3 is the message that John was to send to the 7 churches. In Revelations chapter 4 and 5, we're not dealing with these. That is a scene that takes place in heaven after the rapture. The church is not mentioned again in the book of Revelations until you get to about chapter 19 or 22, one of those chapters. The church is not mentioned because it's gone. Church left, the rapture's taken place, and there's a great crowd of people gathered around the throne. Then there is a vision that God gives to John of God's throne, and the Father is holding a book, a 7-sealed book in his hand. And he says, no man could open this book. No man in heaven, no man in earth, and no man beneath the earth. Nobody could open this book. This book, what was so important about this seven-sealed book? This book was the purchased possession. It was the title deed to everything Adam lost in the garden. And that's what Jesus came to buy back, to redeem that which was lost. Not just you, but to redeem everything that Adam lost. And no man could take that book and then suddenly the Lion of the tribe of Judah steps forth and takes the book and begins to open the seven seals. Now that's seven seals. Revelation 6 through 9, 4 chapters, shows a series of events that are going to take place on the earth. These are real events. They are going to happen. They're going to take place. But it's going to be in God's time, because He's the only one that knows when it's going to be. Revelations chapter 6, I'm going to go through it. And we won't spend a lot of time on it. I don't want to bore you. But in chapter 6, verse 1 and 2, John said, I saw the Lamb, and He opened one of the seals. And he heard a voice that sounded like thunder saying, come and see. He said, I saw a white horse. He that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Now, this white horse is not Jesus. This is the Antichrist. He tries to imitate the Antichrist. We will talk more about him later, so I'm not going to deal with him a whole lot. But he's going forth conquering and to conquer. He's taking over nation after nation. He opened the second seal. Again the voice said, come and see. And there went out another horse that was red. And power was given to him that sat on the throne to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given him a great sword. Now, this is the red horse of war. Nation against nation. People killing each other. Then verse 5 and 6. He opened a third seal. Again he heard this voice, come and see. And there was a black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Now what in the world is he talking about here? The black horse is famine. Famine is a result of wars, scarcity of food. Now this, a measure of wheat for a penny, that's about a quart. A measure is about a quart, and that was the ration for a slave. A slave worked all day for food to eat for one day. And if you, as you read it down, it talks about food becomes 5 times higher than it was. That's inflation. That means if you go to the store and what you would spend $1 on will then cost you $5. Inflation is a disaster. It's a thief. It robs people. And when he said, see that you hurt not the oil and the wine, what was he talking about? I've heard all kinds of explanation, but it's really simple. He's talking about the olive trees and the vineyards. During war, they were forbidden to destroy the olive trees for the oil and the vineyards because they were essential for survival in that country. They had to have that oil and the wine because the water, most of it was not fit to drink. So they were forbidden, armies were forbidden not to hurt the oil or the wine. Verse 7 and 8, are you okay so far? Yes. Are you bored yet? No. Okay, verse 7 and 8. When it opened the fourth seal, there was another voice said, "Come and see." And a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed him, and power was given to them. There were two riders for this horse, death and hell, and them over a fourth part of the earth to kill with sword, with hunger, and with the beast of the earth. It says pale horse in the translation, but the Greek word is kaloros, and it means green. But I'm sure, now listen, I've seen a lot of horses. I used to raise horses. And I've seen a lot of horses in my life. I've never seen a green one. So I'm sure when the interpreters saw this, they said, there's no such thing as a green horse, so we'll call it a pale horse. And we talk about the pale horse rider and all that. But he was green. It was a green horse. But he also said there would be beast out of the earth. Now that's not talking about your little pet pup at home. Automatically one day decides it's going to start chewing on your leg and eating your leg. It's talking about beast out of the earth. It's talking about viruses, bacterias that there's no cure for. You look at some of these things coming out of the earth and disease. We just finished a pestilence. Right. We're coming down to the end of it. It was called COVID-19. A lot of people died around the planet. A pestilence is a highly contagious, deadly disease that there's no cure for. Does that sound like COVID-19? I don't know. I'm just saying what I can see. He opened the fifth seal. And under the altar, I saw them that were slain for the word of God and the testimony which they held. Now I'll talk about this just a little bit. And they cried with a loud voice, "How long, O Lord, are you going to wait to judge and avenge our blood?" And white robes were given unto every one of them, and they were told they should rest or wait for a little season, a little while longer, and they gave them a time frame until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. Now this is so critical. These people who were killed were Jews who refused, they recognized, and they refused to worship the Antichrist. They recognized him for who he was. Now, the tribulation, as I understand it, is primarily for the Jews. The Holy Spirit and the church is gone. A lot of Gentiles. Now, wait, let's stop just a minute. Let's stop just a minute. God chose Abraham, and through Abraham and his seed, he was going to bring forth a Messiah who would be a blessing to the whole earth. He used the Jewish people that were called the oracle people. And that simply means that God was going to write out his plan for mankind through them, whether they liked it or not. They didn't have a choice. They could reject God, follow after idols. God would punish them. He would send them into slavery and bring them back. When they'd recognize what God was doing, they'd come back to God. over and over and over. He was going to write out his plan for man through the Israelites, seed of Abraham. Now Paul talked about, in the book of Romans, he talked about the olive tree. And the olive tree was cut off. The branch was cut off. That was Israel. The Jews rejected Jesus. And when they rejected him, God cut them off and turned to the Gentiles. That's where the church age comes in. Paul said that's the wild olive branch that was grafted in to the olive tree. But now, in my opinion, when the rapture takes place, he turns back to the Jews, to Israel, and he cuts the Gentiles off. Now listen, there are no Jews going to be at the marriage supper of the Lamb because they rejected the Messiah. Marriage supper of the Lamb, they're going to have to go through the tribulation and deny, refuse to worship the Antichrist in order to be saved. And in Revelations chapter 7, verse 4, it says, I heard the number of them. Now there was a few of them saved the first 3.5 years because they recognized that the Antichrist was not the Messiah and they refused to bow down and worship him. Now in verse 4 it says, the number of them that were sealed was 144,000 of all of the tribes of Israel. 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. Now, as far as I can see, that's the only ones that's going to be saved during tribulation. Now, I could be wrong. I hope I am. I hope some of you that's not planning on going in the rapture have a chance to get saved, but I seriously doubt it. I cannot find it in the book. It talks about multitudes a time or two, but they're the Gentiles that are already gone. The church is gone. Holy Spirit's gone. No man can come to the Father except the Spirit draw him. How are you going to be saved? If he doesn't draw you, there's no salvation possible. Now, I know I'm stretching you a little bit. Verses 12, 14. The sixth seal. There was an earthquake. The sun became black. Now, this is weird. Black as sackcloth of hair. How black is a sackcloth of hair? I have no clue. The moon becomes as blood. The stars of heaven fall to the earth as a fig tree shakes her untimely figs and is shaken in the wind. The heavens departed as a scroll rolled together. Every mountain and island were moved out of their place. Now I need to spend just a little bit of time. Verse 13 is not talking about the fixed stars that we go out and look at night. Obviously there was a meteorite that passed that actually covered the earth with all kinds of shooting stars. The earthquake, a megaquake. They really believe that a giant earthquake or a megaquake is what darkened the sun. It threw so much debris into the heavens that the sun couldn't shine, the plant life died, the dinosaurs all died off. The sun became blackened. You could not see the sun. The moon, looking through the dust, looked like a ball of fire. It was red. Now, did I lose you somewhere along the way? Verse 14 does not mean the mountains and the islands were totally eliminated or destroyed, because years later we see the mountains and the islands that are again affected by another earthquake. So they were not totally destroyed. Verses 15 through 17. If you want to go on a little bit. All right, verse 15. The kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the chief captains, mighty men, every bondman, every free man, hid themselves in the dens and rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? There's no indication anybody's getting saved out of that bunch. It lists 7 classes of people who realize that the wrath of God has just begun, and this all takes place the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. We haven't even got to the bad stuff yet. The last 3.5 years, the years of Jacob's trouble. Doesn't say anything about Gentiles. It's divided in 2 parts. 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. But the only people I can find getting saved out of that period of time are all Jews. A lot of people disagree with me. I think I'm going to quit here. But I'm going to tell you, there are some terrible things coming on the earth. And I don't want to be here when it happens. And I don't want you to be here. I don't want your family to be here. How many think it would probably be a whole lot better to go in the rapture than to try to face tribulation? Jesus talking to, I said I was going to quit. I am going to quit. I'm tired. Jesus talking to some religious people, scribes and Pharisees, and he told them an old fisherman's parable. It wasn't scriptural, it was just a fisherman's parable. And you say red sky in the morning, sailor's warning. Red sky at night, sailor's delight. He said you can obviously discern the signs of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times. Church, there's some very interesting signs taking place right now on this planet. It's going to be interesting to see what's going to develop in the near future. Now, I don't know, and nobody else knows what's going to happen. I'm not going to stand up here and pretend to know all that's going to happen. I don't. That's all left in the hands of the Father. But I do know this much. When the fullness of time is come, Jesus is coming back. And the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel. The trump of God will sound, and we which are alive and remain will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air.